nowhere, I got a notification we were live. It's like, what happened? Did we change the time?
Oh. I was not saying anything.
All will be revealed.
Yeah, well, you know, that's like just your opinion, man.
All right, so hello and welcome to the Audio Opinion Show, where audio people have opinions about things because that's just something that we're particularly good at. I'm joined today by a whole sea of mostly sound reinforcement folks. And for the purposes of simplicity, we have an Andrew and an Andy. Do not be confused. The Andrew is very clearly from another country. So that's the thing to remember about that. I need to bring this up so I can see what I'm doing. There we go. So now everybody can see everybody. So if you've joined us on YouTube and you're wondering how to get in on this, you can email me at the email address on my YouTube page, and I can give you all the instructions on how to get in. But yep, we close the doors at 5 till, and after that, you missed this one and you got to join the next one. So away we go. We're going to start with our first polling question. And our first polling question is, launching the poll, what was Inigo Montoya's father's profession? And if you don't know who Inigo Montoya is, then you need to get off my channel. So was he a vidiot? Was he pyro? Was he a lampy? Was he the idiot monitor guy? Was he the RF tech? Or was he a sword maker? Make your choices now. Make them wisely. I see there's votes coming in from all over. It's a close run, and it does indeed look like he was a sword maker. I know a lot of us.
Brian, he was a bladesmith.
Oh, it's true. True.
Well, are you going to sue Brian now for having false, inaccurate information about this poll?
Inaccurate information. Jason,
I don't know if you guys understand what I'm talking about there with that reference.
Jason voted RF tech, so you know.
I did not.
It wasn't Jason. I can attest to that.
An honest man. I love you, Ike.
Oh, okay.
The next time on May 2, I am going to go by the name of Montoya.
I'll just say, when my youngest was little and we were getting in the car seat, it was always, "In you go, Montoya." And so that worked for a while. And then when he was old enough, we showed him the movie. So.
All right, so now we'll actually talk about what we're actually going to talk about. So our first topic poll is up. All of y'all should see it. If you're on YouTube, you don't see it. Sorry about that. That's just the way it is because Zoom isn't great. So our first topic, 1, what's the best audio job in the world? Number 2, end fire versus other kinds of subwoofer arrays. Number 3, what's the hardest audio job to do? Number 4, what kinds of noise reduction do we like? Cedar DNSs, Portico 5045, something else? Do we like wired or wireless? Actual pros and cons, not just one sounds better than the other, but you know, actual pros and cons. And then our last possible topic is point source versus line array. And I'm going to vote now because I can. Votes are coming in madly. And we are going to be talking about, with 4 votes, what's the hardest audio job to do? Given the fact that we have probably 4 or 5 different specialties on the panel, this should be fun. So what's the hardest audio job to do? And maybe by extension, you could even say, what is the most valuable audio job to do? But we'll start with the hardest audio job to do. And because we like to be as kind as possible to the newest person, I'm going to ask Nathan first.
Watch your last stream.
It's like I was ready for this. I knew what was coming.
I'm not, because I'm still forming an opinion.
Well,
my opinions have to be well informed.
Top of your head though, what do you think the hardest audio job is, so that then everybody can then disagree with you, and then we'll get going.
And no better place to form an opinion.
Personally, I think that it's probably the person who needs to deal with the client relationships, and then go the intermediate between the technical person, kind of liaison. But they're kind of stuck in that role, and I don't know exactly who that is. It depends on the show size. Sometimes it's front of house tech on a small show, and he's always, juggling 15 hats. Or at a bigger show, one of you guys could probably give more insight into that kind of dealing with.
Yeah, is anybody here ever been the touring tour manager / front of house guy / everything? So tell I will get to you, Andrew, but tell me, Karl, what that fun was like.
Yeah, when I was touring in the 90s, I was front of house monitors and pretty much the liaison, in charge of the crew, dealing with the house team. I did have a system tech on the team who was fantastic and ended up going to work for Claire and so on. But being the front of house guy out there all alone, dealing with audience members, dealing with the house staff, was crazy at times. I mean, I enjoyed it. It was a great challenge. But when things got weird, it was really, really tough. I mean, so I agree with Nathan. It has the potential, and at times for me was the hardest job. I mean, trying to do it all with a very small crew was very tough.
I'm going to play devil's advocate and jump in here and say probably the monitor tech on a big show where the artist doesn't like them. That's probably the hardest job.
Yeah.
Being the monitor tech on any show when the artist doesn't like you is quite challenging.
Try monitor engineer.
Right.
Good point. Yes.
I got to disagree. I think monitor technician's not so bad if you have the right gear. And it's the hardest gig to do when you've got the loud band and the shitty gear. The crappy gear.
It's fine.
That makes it a really hard job.
Man.
But it's a hard job no matter if all your tools are broken. That's the hardest gig.
Yeah, right. It's the difference between 5 mentally ill clients in front of you screaming at you and 10,000 mentally ill clients dissatisfied, right?
I mean, I really think that, I enjoyed doing music when I did it, and I probably stopped doing, I stopped doing it on any kind of regular level almost 20 years ago. And since then, I've probably done no more than 40 shows in the last 20 years that were actual music gigs. And a lot of the reason why I don't miss it is, yes, you just inevitably, one side of the snake or the other, you're dealing with some form of mentally ill something. And and it can get super, super not fun very quickly. I mean, I will say, doing really big shows front of house where you've got an island around you and a giant path where the snake goes to the stage, and they're away from you, then it's kind of fun, because then you're like, okay, I'm 100 feet away from the craziness that's going on stage right now. They're just sending me pretty noises, and then I just have to make them come out of speakers, and these people, I can't even hear them yelling at me, so I don't care. But, as soon as you get down to doing theater gigs and everybody's walking past you to the bathroom and everybody's got an opinion about what they can hear and not hear, it's yeah. Go ahead.
Jason, I was thinking too, from a monitor engineer point of view, isn't it super dependent on the client and the level of trust? I mean, you probably had fantastic clients that you loved working with, and they understood your job, and you gave them what they wanted, and everything's golden. And then you probably had clients that just were never happy.
Yeah, I went from 10 years with a client who every day I mixed what I thought sounded amazing. I loved it. And every day I'd go on his bus. Hey, got any notes? How's it sound? It's awesome. and then went from that to an absolute nightmare of an extremely mentally ill man who was a big star and could do no wrong. And I don't want to shift too abruptly, but the last quarter of my career has brought a very a new compassion for broadcast A1s, because these guys, man, they sit in the truck, they're air conditioned, they're not out there in the trenches with the rest of us. And, in our community, kind of are not fully appreciated because we feel they have the cushy gig. But can you imagine sitting at your console knowing that downstream of what you produce, every stage of processing is completely out of your control and will be presented to literally millions of people?
That is only part of it, my friend, because while
Oh,
you were
yes, it
sitting there, I was going to say broadcast A1 too, because while you were sitting there trying to listen to whatever it is you're mixing, you also have probably at least 5 different audio sources coming at you that are not the program, like the director, the assistant director, floor directors. You may also be responsible for the intercom, and someone might suddenly say, "Oh, truck, can you force my patch from here to here so that I can hear so and so, and maybe turn them up just a little bit?" And meanwhile,
that's more the EIC's gig, but you're
nope,
absolutely right. They got the poor engineers got to listen to it all.
Intercom is still it's starting to get to a point like the jobs that I've been doing where there's somebody has said, you know what, we really need a separate person to run the intercom. But up until like the last couple of years, that was like that was part of the gig. And I've sat in that chair like a couple of times when it didn't really mean anything, and it was pretty intense. And I and the other thing is, like, if you're in a truck, you might be sitting like a couple of feet in front of a rack that is full of DAs, for example, that have 3 fans each, and and then maybe there's a little space heater running because the back end of the truck doesn't get as much heat as the rest of it, and people are in and out, and so it is a tough job.
And even when it's to tape, if you blow a cue in real time, it could be literally $50,000 to $75,000 to $100,000 to go back in post-production, get the artist back in the seat in front of a microphone and correct that error. And it could happen multiple times in a show. Yeah, that's some pretty serious responsibility.
Yeah, doing a lot, and it's to tag on to what Ike was saying, and I will say that I spent the last before a couple of years ago, I spent about 3 or 4 years doing a lot of mid-range production stuff that was high profile, but it was all webcast, so it wasn't TV trucks, and it was smaller crews, and everything was ramped down, and yeah, I was the A1 and I was the intercom guy, and my A2 was whoever they found on the day, which oftentimes was not great. Could just be a video utility that I got, stuck with. And I'm sitting there in our little mini truck, with my headphones on with like 7 different sources panned to different places in my ears because I've got 3 channels of intercom and the program, and then the other and I'm running ClearComm Eclipse, Agent IC, IP drops all over the world, like all that stuff, and getting, middle of the show can you add Jesse to button 3 on my panel? And I'm like, sure, while I do this, and I'll log into this thing, and it's the funny thing is, like, I mean, and I agree with you, Jason and Ike, your central point, because when you get to the big leagues, the stakes are so high. But sometimes the middle leagues are like harder to do.
Yeah, sure. If there's no audio on the tape, there's no audio on the tape, and everybody knows about it.
That's absolutely, man. No budget, no quality. I mean, you got 3 choices: fast, good. What's the other one?
Cheap.
Cheap,
Inexpensive,
loud.
Exactly. So yeah,
The hardest
it gets
gig is
worse
always
though.
the one
It gets
where you
worse. I bumped into an A1 that I hadn't seen for a while on a gig a couple of years back, and he was telling me that he had just finished up some minor to mid-level sporting thing, like the something or other, the Ontario Games or something like that, and there was an entertainment component on the last day, and they came to him in the truck and said, "Oh well, could you give us a feed for the PA system, because we didn't hire anybody to." We didn't hire anybody for that position.
Yeah.
So there's no front of house. It's just, it's all coming out of the truck. It's like,
yeah. Oh, by the way, Andy's been trying to get in. Lipnick has been trying to get in a word in edgewise like 4 times. So
just to distinguish myself from the other Andrew, I'll just go USA. Anyway, but okay, so
just talk about there was like certain rules that you're flirting with it. You're like he's going to the edge. Like, all right.
No, anyway, I'm with you, truck guys. I've A2'd just a handful of times for a truck as an A2, and man, I knew enough not to want to be in the hot seat as an A1 in the truck for the events I was working on, because and the other thing too is you're at the mercy of your A2 and your A3 and all those other people that are supporting you. Yeah, that is no fun. But I've done just about every kind of audio job there is, but I focused on a number, and I cut my teeth in theater and when I was younger, and I've come back to it every now and again. And I will say this, from what I can tell, that being an audio engineer on the Broadway level, where you are opping Broadway level shows, I can't think of anything harder, because you only get one shot at it each night, for one thing. 2 is, if you're doing like a high level musical where you could have like 40%, 40 singers on wireless or whatever it is, the counts are really high. And by the way, I've not done that level of musical, but I have done high level. I've done some big theater gigs too, but just not Broadway level. But they have to memorize the book. That's another thing. They have to memorize the entire show, because if they take their eyes off the stage and off their console, they are going to miss something. So there's that. There's also that they are also, hopefully there's been a good sound designer involved in the show, because if there hasn't been, they're going to hear it every night from their audience. There's that. If they miss a cue, they miss a mic cue, it's really apparent, if the mic's on or off. So there's that. Then there's also this whole other layer of it that I will just briefly mention, which is, for example, a musical like Green Day, American Idiot. I think that was the name of it. I saw that. That was a show where they had headset mics, I believe. And the sound of that show is not rock and roll. It wanted to be rock and roll because it's rock, it's rock and roll, right? It's Green Day. But it sounded like a lot of the other musicals I've heard where the sound is thin. And I don't mean that as an insult to the sound. It's just the nature of theater in that setting, trying to get voice above the band, so forth and so on, limitations of theaters, sound systems, all the things that go into theater. Because they weren't using handheld mics. They were using headset mics, and they had a band on stage.
Lack of proximity effect.
Exactly.
Which is a big part of rock and roll.
Yeah, and there was a band upstage, that had to keep their volume down too. That so it
game before feedback issues would be huge.
All that stuff. Yeah. So I feel for them who are working at that level. I've been like, the next tier or two down from that and had my challenges with it, but it just seems really hard. I will put it up there with truck A1s.
Did anybody else, and Andrew, I'll go to you next. Did anybody else see the thing with Adam Savage from Mythbusters and the theater behind the scenes? If you haven't, or if you're within the sound of my voice, go search it, because it's eye opening, because I sort of kind of knew that this was true, but then so he's talking to the guy, one of the guys that's doing Hamilton, and they're mixing line by line. Like, I mean, yeah, there's scene changes that are getting faders closer to them so that they can get into, but they're still literally mixing line by line for the entire and then of course, it's an understudy, so now it's a different cable path, or so and so is a little bit hoarse tonight because they're, so then it's a little bit, and like you said, and everybody that's at the show has spent a lot of their hard-earned money to be there, and
and that's a very young engineer in that video who totally gets it. Even with all his years in the business, he's one of the young ones, and he's nailing it on the top show.
Right. I mean, that's no small thing. Canadian Andrew, you were going to say something.
I was going to just say I've had a chance to do some theater work as well as live, and it's live, of course, but I think the thing about those kind of things, you think about any musician who has to learn the whole show and play the whole show, or even the conductor, or anybody, the stage manager who has to, line by line know what's going on, call all those cues. If you've ever listened to the comms on those types of shows, it's unbelievable how many cues they're spitting out. So I think for me, it feels like it seems scary. It's like looking at a cockpit. How on earth has anybody ever figured that out? But once you do it and you've done it, you get systems together and you understand what's going on, and it's not confusing anymore. So any job that you haven't done, or you're just watching somebody else do, always is going to look like the hardest job in the world. People come up to you all the time as a sound person. How do you know how to run all those knobs? Well, that looks incredibly complicated to them. But if you do it all the time,
do you really know what all the knobs and buttons do? Do you really know what?
Well, I think so. Any job where you're experienced at it and you get to control it, this is a big part of it. Can you put together the equipment the way you want it to be? Can you control the show? Like people go, oh, how do you deal with this loud band? Well, if you're in control and you go, I'm going to do this my way, then it's not so bad. You're fine. The hardest job is the one where you walk into somebody else's disaster and you try to fix it, or you, without any control or without any help from the producers to do what you need to do. If you're walking into something where you're in charge of it, it should be pretty easy if you have experience to design and create it in the way that you need to create it. So when I look at it, what's the hardest job to do? It's always going to be the one where you're out of control, or you're just trying to come in and fix something else, or to work with somebody who's not cooperating or not giving you the power to do what you need to do. Or if you're extremely inexperienced in that area, if I was to try and do lighting or something like this, or I have no idea what I'm doing, well, that would be the hardest job in the world for me. So I think the easiest job would be the one that you're used to doing and you have control over, and the hardest job would be the one you've never done before and nobody's giving you any help, and you've got terrible gear and yada yada.
Yeah, I would argue that that corporate audio may well be the hardest freaking thing to do for the reasons that you just said, because the bigger the show, the bigger the people, the less chance they're going to rehearse with you. And so everybody's nodding their heads, because we all know it's like, it doesn't make any difference what you're doing if you can't actually rehearse with the actual talent before they do the. So I did a big convention last year, and it was about 18,000 people in the hall, and they decided to bring all the Democratic presidential candidates in to interview them, kind of last minute, like day 2 of the convention, and so that's great. And I didn't think it would be. I thought it'd be a minor press event, and I came in, day of show, and they've put up like, I don't know, 80 feet of press riser on either side of me, and everybody's cameras are already going up. And this is all going live on all the majors. It's going live on CNN and ABC and NBC and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Millions of people. And we're basically putting lavs on people, and they're walking out in front of 18,000 people who are screaming their fool heads off. And I'm trying to get over top of that live in front of millions of people because everybody was carrying it live. And it's like, well, that was fun. Like, it was just, and it would not have been that hard if, can we have stand-ins even that come in? Can we have 18,000? I was getting 105 dB of crowd sound at front of house. Like, it was like a Beatles concert. And I've just got regular old 105s, lavs on various people, and they're having their little like conversations on stage, and I've got to somehow get above all that and not have it howl for several million people. And it's like, had there been a rehearsal, had I been able to say, no, everybody has to be on handhelds and they all have to move 20 feet up stage, and like, if I could control the variables, no big deal. But when you
try 4K at New Kids on the Block or Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch,
right?
14-year-old girl shriek.
Yeah,
it's deafening.
Yeah, but there's a slider for that. Come on, there's a slider for
room.
that on the Clark.
I thought one of the sound guys for one of those boy bands ended up moving his mixing position out into a truck because he just couldn't take it anymore. It's a story I heard once.
I could believe that. I could totally believe that.
Buford Jones did it on Faith Hill, but those girls weren't shrieking for Faith Hill.
They were shrieking for Jason. That's who it was.
For Tim.
I think it was you. I'm pretty sure it was you. I feel certain.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the console. You got the 1,000 buttons and knobs in front of you, and when people, your families, your friends walk up behind you and you invite them to the show, they're like, "Oh my God, this is insane! It must be incredibly difficult." No, it's not. Every button, every knob has a very specific function. It's scientifically accurate, measurable, quantifiable. What's not is this esoteric concept of what's important.
Every knob has the potential to be the suck knob.
Yes. Yeah.
But
Gary
every knob is a
Larson
volume.
nailed it,
They're
man.
all volume controls. Every one of them is a volume control.
Well, on that topic of that Andrew brought up about, maybe not knowing what you're or not being comfortable and being thrust into a position that, is above your level. I would put RF tech in there as one of those that you would just go down in flames if you really didn't know what's going on. I mean, you could be a decent audio guy and then having to deal with a large channel count of wireless. I mean, Jason, you could chime in, or Ike, but I mean, that scared the pants off of me when I first started getting into it.
I love the job. I love
Broadway shows.
I love the job.
Yeah.
The more,
it's
the
awesome.
merrier.
I mean,
I love it.
We are the cable.
It's great what we do. I mean, no argument there, but I just mean that it's over the head of someone who doesn't know anything about it. And there's almost no way to dig yourself out of that hole if that's the position you end up in.
Yeah, no, if you get thrown into it and you don't know what you're doing, yeah, that's a bad place.
Yep.
But as someone who seems to know, I love doing RF. It's my favorite thing to do, and I don't really miss, being. Occasionally I've had some hankering to mix a little bit lately, but for the most part, I love doing the RF gig and I wouldn't change it for anything.
Jason,
it's a pass-fail gig with insanely high tolerance.
Yeah. But
Right?
Jason, you were talking about you ended up with a client that was mentally ill. Was that when you made the transition to being an RF tech? Did you change careers based on that? I was just curious.
I mixed monitors for that screwed up guy for over a year. I made more money than I ever made in my whole career as a monitor engineer. And everything was wonderful at home, but it gave me an ulcer. He was, that's all I'll say.
and there you go. I actually, the last two big shows that I've done, one last December and one in February, I was the RF tech. Which was, sort of a new branching into something new thing. And thankfully, I knew enough that I succeeded and it wasn't pure luck. But I absolutely also am not 1,000% comfortable being that, because it's one of those things where I know that there's things that I don't know. And there's also some of it too is like, there's a lot of the tools of the trade that I know that, Ike and Jason have, a workbox full of filters and a workbox full of bits and pieces and analysis equipment and all kinds of things that I know what they do, I know how they work, and I know why you would use them, but I don't necessarily have access to them. And if I don't have access, it makes things trickier.
And Brian, I think one of the things that I see in my students and people who approach me looking for help, don't sell yourself short. You don't have to know the equations. As long as you approach the whole prospect with a scientific, solid, and I say scientific in its truest form, postulate, theorize, experiment, learn. And as long as you keep doing that, and as long as you keep finding the path through this complex maze on that basis, you'll be the best RF tech there ever was. And you don't have to know the first thing about intermodulation distortion math.
Right.
That's a good point. I mean, I sort of came up through that range. When I teach, one of the things that I point out is that many other people that are up there standing in their teaching RF are, radio heads that, built their first AM receiver when they were 8 years old and got their ham license and, never met a radio wave they didn't like. My path to it was also through theater. And my path into the industry was through theater. When I was like 16 years old, I was a stagehand at a professional house, and that thing of lights come, house lights down, stage lights up, showtime. I mean, that was it. It was like I'm a show guy, and wireless is something that you use on a show, and if it disrupts a show, that's a very bad thing, and that's my main focus for making it work. And the other thing is it's an organizational thing more than anything else. And I mean, can anyone here remember doing a gig when there was no stage plot, no input list? I mean, that doesn't happen as much anymore, but I remember, in the late 70s, early 80s, when it's just, and like, that was a disaster too. It's just, but then everybody said, oh yeah, you can do an input list. You can actually say in advance that the kick drum's going to go in channel 1 and snare is going to go in channel 2. And when I started doing frequency coordination, people were surprised that I didn't have to go to the venue and make it all up on the spot. I go, no, I'm going to do the coordination in advance. And I'm going to say, this frequency is going to, and you get there, and yeah, sometimes there's some noise or something that you have to move 1 or 2 frequencies. Sometimes maybe there's an occupied TV channel that you didn't know about or something like that, but it's an organizational thing. So yeah.
I do a festival every year that has no stage plots. It's a band after band. They want basically no change over time. So we just put microphones up, we put DIs up, We, as a stage manager, we walk around it and we plug things in and let the sound guys know what's going on. Or
Have
they
you
let
read
us
my
know.
article of Foolproof Festival Patch?
I didn't see that. No,
It's on my website. It's also on Pro Sound Web, but it basically addresses that. And it sounds like you're doing that thing, which is that basically I just went, you know what? People have to stand somewhere when they're on the stage. So I'm going to put, mic the drum kit, mic the bass, and then 8 instrument mics, 8 instrument DIs, 8 vocal mics, and you give them a position. Off stage right, number 1. On stage, stage right, number 2, center right, number 3, center left, and it makes all that stuff go away.
Ike, I love it. It's brilliant. But for the last 6, 7, maybe 8 years, I've worked one of the biggest stadium genre specific festivals. I'll put it like that. Shows. And for the last, every one of them, one of our headliners every year, there, you might as well just take out a lighter and burn their rider every year. Up to last year, just burn it. It's worthless. And the festival patch you propose, I've seen it, dude. It's awesome. I mean, in all logical, experienced manner of doing a show, you nail it. Except on this one. 28 wireless handhelds, not enough. 5 minutes before the show, we got to have 29. After the show starts, where's the microphone? Give me a microphone. Give me 30. And on and on until it was like, nope, we don't have it. So that's the modern state of things, I mean, we got these artists out of control. We're creative. We can't be limited. We have a vision. And, I mean, that's where we're at.
Yeah.
I will say there is, and I've done that festival or those kinds of festivals, those kinds of things a few times. Sometimes there is a freedom to, we don't have any more. Like, and it literally be true. Like, you keep a couple in your back pocket because but sometimes there's a freedom of just, they spec'd 28 RFs. I know that they're gonna ultimately.
Oh no, they spec'd 18.
Well, there you go.
24 was pre-show. But the best part is when the account manager, my dear friend for many years, he's standing behind me, trying to stand up. He's laughing so hard. And I knew this was where it was gonna go. He's like, and it's, you just gotta laugh and do it.
I think you guys bring up actually an interesting point, which is that early in my career, I didn't say no because it was early in my career, and I just every request people would make, I would try and fulfill. And in hindsight, learning how to say no, when to say no, and what to say no to, those are skills that they do not teach audio engineers generally.
Yeah, that's one that's there was. I won't tell the stories because they're painful.
Hey, Brian, maybe we should address that because really it is a business. We're in a business. So, I've kind of come to this spot where the answer, yes or no, is can money solve this problem? Right up until money can't. That's when I say no.
No. I think the time to say no is when you go, oh, maybe I should become a roadie or something.
Well,
too late.
Jason, I think you're onto something because, I've been on shows where, you kept saying yes because you knew the check was going to clear. And so consequently, it's like, I mean, I have a long story that I will digest down to 2 sentences. Okay, down to 1 sentence. They chartered the Concorde to get the piece of gear to the show. So yeah, when you're dealing with that client who is willing.
Oh, no. Look, dude, this works at every level. No.
But
when the money bumps up against the physics, because the physics will not move.
Right.
Period.
Well, but the reason, I would argue. I mean, we're not arguing, we're agreeing. But you also have to. I mean, there are those clients that you already know they're going to. They want 12 more of something. And then you're going to order the 12 more of something. You're going to have it overnighted. You're going to get it there. You're going to, say, they're going to sign the piece of paper that says absolutely no problem. And then your account manager is going to call you into their office a month later and go, they won't pay for this. And, and there's a certain amount of, understanding your situation and understanding that, okay, physically I could make this happen, but
this bum ain't gonna pay.
Right. Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's, I could tell another long story that I won't, but it was like, the venue was, I don't know, 8,000 seats, something like it was outdoors, but there was, they said, we're going to have 8,000 people there. And 1,800 people showed up. And then all of a sudden, and we also need you to add, and we need you to add. And I'm like, I already know you're losing your shirt on this. I already know you probably don't have enough to cover the second half of what you already owe us. So yeah, we could send a truck. Technically, we could get it here, but I'm just going to say I don't think that's something that's going to happen. So, now I love being in situations where you're dealing with a trusted customer and you're dealing with a relationship, and then you can solve their problem and, get the thing there and rescue the day and do the thing. And then I also, there is something very, wonderful about having the backstop of the show has started. There's only an hour left in the show. You want 8 more of something that isn't here.
And
I can't bend time and space. I can't fold. There's no warp machine that's going to get this here in time. So
and there's that collision of the art and the business.
Right.
And ideally you have a production manager who is the buffer between you and that person. But I was just going to say that we, as audio people, are up against, I think, something that I don't see video people up against as much, which is I'll just call it the black magic of audio, which is all that mysterious stuff that the artist or the lackey or whoever it is thinks they know. And we know will either not make any difference whatsoever if that, this piece of equipment versus that piece of equipment, this many of that versus this many of that, all that, I mean, if you've got a nice line array rig, why do you need 50 more speakers? You know what I mean? Things like that, where it's not going to make a difference. And it also could make your show not be as good for various reasons. And it's interesting, and I'll just point this last thing out, which is funny to me, because sometimes video people will come up to me and they'll go, I just don't understand what you guys do. How do you, like they don't get it, and they admit that. Because for them, it's like, does it look good or not? Whereas sound is a little more mysterious than that. And I think that extends out to what I'm getting at here, which is we sometimes work with artists or people who think they just know, and they don't. But yeah. we have to pretend they do know sometimes.
Yeah, I think I think we've kind of come full circle, which is kind of the whole point of these conversations. Although, Ed, have I heard from you? I feel like I haven't heard from you.
Nope, not yet. But I'm gonna say back to the original topic. Similar to what you were saying, Brian. The that mid-level corporate audio person, whether A1, that's a role I find myself in often, where all of the things we talked about land on my shoulders as the one person. Another thing I was thinking as we're talking about this, maybe not the hardest job, but the hardest thing to find is a good A2 on those kinds of jobs. Everyone's nodding their head. So I've done so many shows where as the A1, I'm hoping that I can have the free speak handled by the A2, and they roll up. They're like, I've never seen free speak before. And I'm like, great. That's, 15, 20 minutes of my time that I have to dedicate to that now, because of course it was rental and it was dropped off and nothing's done with it. So, and it's been, all the packs have been, registered to some other base unit. So,
I think it's incredibly unfair that they're called A1s and A2s. I think the jobs are different jobs, and they shouldn't be like one is better than two, which is the way people think about it.
Right.
And
in that
different
mid-level
jobs that are just as hard.
Mid-level market, like Brian was talking about before, the AV companies that I work for a lot, they treat the A2 as if it is a lesser position, not realizing like I need a guy or person who has the skill set. I need someone who's fluent in Dante, because if they don't know Dante, like that's not useful to me at all. If they're not organized, I had a show where we had the cast of Dear Evan Hansen performing at a corporate gig, and the A2 showed up an hour late, and he showed up not knowing free speak. The console they sent me, so we had 12 performers, and they all were singing on wireless Beta 58s, and the console they sent me was a Soundcraft Impact, an SI Impact with 14 faders on the face. The A1 for Dear Evan Hansen was, she came and was going to mix the show. She's like, I don't know what this is. I've never seen this board. They didn't send me an iPad. Thankfully, in my tech kit, I always have my iPad, my router. And I actually stood next to her, and she's like, can you put some compression on him? Can we do this? We had no real sound check. And it was a mess. And the A2 just was no help through the whole thing. The best thing they could do was run some cable for me. And even that, I had to double check what was going on, and the PA was Siva's, it wasn't, nothing. But he couldn't, patch the amps and didn't know what the processing was like. So it was just, a handful of things where if I had someone who could anticipate what I was going to need ahead of time, it would have been great. So I don't know that it's the hardest job A2, but it's definitely the hardest, it seems like, to find good A2s. And when you do, treat them like gold, because they're great.
It could be a whole show topic, is what makes a good A2.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. They're the hero. All our corporate clients love them, right up until one of those corporate clients suddenly decides they don't like the way that guy smells. I have seen that.
Oh yeah.
I've seen that. The poor guy worked his ass off all day long. And some client objected to the way he smelled and never got called back.
Yeah, I have done, continue to do. I'm kind of a jack of all trades. I do a ton of corporate A2 stuff, and it's a gig, man. It's a deal. And now, thankfully, I do know how to hop right a free speak. But yeah, but yeah, a lot of this mid-level corporate stuff, they'll fly an A1 in and then just pick up whoever else is local. I did a thing just a few months ago when we were still doing gigs, and I spec'd a D&B rig, and an A2 and whatever, and they said, okay, we'll pick all that up locally, and I showed up, and it was a DB Tech rig, which is very much not the same thing, that I've never seen before in my life, and half of it didn't show up, and the points were all in the wrong place, and the PA was done as a dry rental with no system tech, and my A2 had never seen it before, or had ever seen a free speak before, or had ever seen digital accent before, and it was a very bad time.
Whoa, how did they get A in front of their title?
Sorry,
dude. There's got to be a minimum there. There
Right.
has to be. I'm sorry, even low level. There has to be a minimum there.
Absolutely. And there's, there's more backstory that I'm not going to share on a public forum, but you would be happy to share in a more, about part of why all of these things were the way that they were. But it was a freaking disaster. Now, the one thing that the one redeeming quality was that the end client, this was an end client that I had worked with, and I mean like the actual like corporate client that I'd worked with before. And, the results were less than stellar. Sound came out when it needed to come out. Microphones went on when they were supposed to come on and went off when they were supposed to go off, and people could understand words everywhere. But that was pretty much, that was it. That's what we got to. And, there was enough just stuff that, the end client was like, I understand, Brian. I understand that this is one of those where we're doing the best that we can in the circumstance. But to just kind of wrap this all up, because it's been a great conversation, we could go for another couple hours, and I did write down our rabbit trail conversations for more conversations. But I think the common thread I think we'd all agree with is most of the hardest part of doing audio is dealing with the people. It's the human interface is really ultimately like, that was the one common thread I saw in all of the positions. It's like when we talk about the position, what's the challenge? It's rarely the tech. I mean, the tech can be hard, but it's nearly always the human interface, either with the client or with the consumer of the goods at the end of the day, or with the musician or with the talent or with the, booking people or whatever. And, we're in the service business. That's what we do for a living is, we're in the service business. And probably if I was, counseling anybody to, what's the most important thing to learn getting into the audio business today, it would be learn good people skills. Everything else is kind of secondary to that. If you have really good people skills and you really work your way through that, the rest of the tech can come and frankly, you can be like really great at sales, and then you can go into one part of the business, or you can be really great at networking and you can go into a different part, or you can be really musical and you go do a different part. But every single one of them, you've got to have the ability to navigate through the dealing with the people that we all have to deal with. So with that, any final thoughts? Anybody? Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that back to the A2 thing real quick, because I've done a lot of A2 work too. I continue to do a lot of A2 work in addition to A1 work. But I had a good mentor a long time ago who taught me that the best A2s are the ones who think like an A1, but don't second guess the A1. And what that really means is the A2 is the eyes and ears backstage for the A1. And if they keep their mind on that game as they work, they will get rehired because they become very valuable. And I'm with you guys also, and the other guys who said that there shouldn't be a big distinction between the hierarchy of an A1 and A2. Absolutely.
And the best ones are a team. They work back and forth off of each other. They communicate. They make sure the job gets done.
Yeah, I have a long-term partnership with somebody that half the time I'm the A1 and they're the A2, and the other half time it's the other way around, and it works out so well. But anyway, I think with that, I think we're gonna say goodbye to our friends on YouTube, and I'm gonna do that and that and that, and we'll just say goodbye to all of our friends in the beautiful land of YouTube with our little play out.
That's like just your opinion.
And just like that,